Now, we want to bring in live now Nick Freeman. Nick's a criminal lawyer. Normally, Nick, when we talk to you, it's about sort of road traffic offences and various things like that. What is it that's gripping you about this story?
Well, good morning, Eamon. It's changing direction so rapidly. I think we're at a stage now where we need to just reflect and say, we have no idea actually what the truth is. And I think that the next thing that must happen is for the BBC to investigate. The police at the moment have said that they're backing away because as far as they're concerned at the moment, and that may be a temporary thing, there is no evidence of criminality.
Yeah. So
the BBC will pursue an investigation, which will obviously be hampered because to pursue that investigation, they need to speak to Huw Edwards, and you know, he has serious mental health issues, and I anticipate he will be out of the picture, so to speak, for quite a while, and therefore will not be fit to be interviewed.
Well, could I ask you,
until we know the facts?
But Nick, in terms of a defence, Nick, just in terms of a defence, you talked about finding out what the truth is and people backing away from things now. Will we ever find out what the truth is, or has this gone away because of Huw's mental health condition and history?
That to a large extent depends on whether or not he recovers, and one of course hopes he does make a full recovery. When he does, he will be spoken to, but he can't be spoken to until that time. He won't be mentally fit to deal with questions either from the BBC or the police, and they've indicated that they're not interested in speaking to him. So to answer that question, we just don't know. It depends on the extent of his recovery, when it is, and how full and complete it is.
Yeah, and I suppose with criminality parked, there seems to be two issues that the BBC need to address. One, whether or not there was inappropriate behaviour, whether that's, you know, approaching staff and using that position of power perhaps in any way, and also the possible abuse or breaking of lockdown rules. But also questions, I think, it seems to me, of the BBC and the speed with which they dealt with the original complaint and did that in anyway, precipitate the outcome in terms of Huw Edwards' mental health. I mean, could it have all been nipped in the bud and dealt with much, much better?
Well, I think that's a very valid point, and I think the BBC will very carefully look at themselves and see, have we done the right thing here, and conclude rapidly, no, we haven't. They left it for 7 weeks, so a very serious complaint was made, as I understand it, against Huw Edwards. They didn't speak to him for 7 weeks. What they should have done is obviously spoken to him straight away, certainly to make him aware that this allegation had been made, because he might have said yay or nay at that point, and it would have affected things enormously. When they made their announcement that a BBC employee, a BBC person had been suspended, they should have simply said a BBC person or a BBC employee. But what they did was they suggested it was somebody extremely high profile, which basically enabled people by the process of elimination to find out who it was. And this has caused huge problems for other presenters and broadcasters. And of course, the BBC owes a duty of care not just to Huw Edwards, but for other very well-known presenters who have suffered enormously as a consequence of the allegations and the whirlwind on Twitter, etc., in terms of whether it's them. This should never have happened. So this has been dealt with, if I may say, very shoddily by the BBC, and they must learn lessons from this, because this is really a shambolic way to deal with an investigation. And it's important to bear in mind that the head of the BBC, who will carefully look at himself, and he didn't know about this either for several weeks, and one wonders how you can have this sort of allegation made against somebody like Huw Edwards. Mr. Edwards doesn't know, and neither does the head of the BBC, for about 7 weeks.
Well, he made the point, didn't he, in a press statement earlier this week, or press conference, that they get around 250 of these sorts of allegations in a 6-month period, which obviously gives you an idea of the scale, obviously, of the BBC, the number of stars that they deal with. It's an unenviable job, but Ofcom have been very clear in all of this, and they've said that ultimate responsibility for any wrongdoing lies with the board. Do you think that perhaps we shouldn't just be talking about the future career of Huw Edwards, but do you think some other heads might roll?
I think heads will roll, because the effect of what's happened is not only of other presenters being really dragged through the mire, but Huw Edwards, who has a right of privacy, and we must remember that, has in effect been a force to forfeit that right because of the way the BBC has dealt with this. He has a right to privacy, he has a right to family life, and we're not entitled to know, in the absence of any criminality, what he's been doing or hasn't been doing. And he's forfeited that right through his wife. because it's reached such a peak. And I'm quite confident that's because of the way that this has been dealt with by the BBC. So it has been catastrophic for the BBC, and I think heads will roll, and this will seriously damage the BBC as one of the nation's institutions.
Except what I would say to you is that, you know, Nick, the BBC's the BBC. It's an institution. Huw Edwards is an individual who chooses to subscribe to a dating app. Is that Tim Davies' responsibility, the managing director of the BBC, or not?
Not at all. But I think, whilst that might not be in any way criminal, I think he would be entitled to know and would want to know if somebody such as Huw Edwards has in fact paid £35,000, allegedly, and I say that allegedly, to look allegedly at some explicit sexual photographs. Because on any view in this day and age, that seems an inordinate amount of money, and one wonders whether or not that there are other reasons behind that significant payment. So, whilst it might not be criminal, when the company as an institution was made aware in May of this year that this allegation was circling, there should have been a system whereby he should have been notified immediately because of the potential seriousness of that allegation. There must be a red flag system. Yes, there's 250 every so often, or every day, or whatever it is. But certain allegations must ring the bells. This one should have, and it didn't.
OK. Nick Freeman, very interesting to get your whole take and your perspective. Appreciate your time and talking to us today. We've got to leave it there. Thank you.
Lots of views have been coming in. I have to say quite a few